biggest healing for me was the Christmas production and playing my flute and having that moment of it all going the way that it should and realising that actually it wasn't me at all, it was him all along.
Welcome to this episode of Soul Matters, a weekly program that looks at life's challenges and the issues of our day and interprets them in the light of the Bible. My name is Alan Vink, and thank you so much for joining us. Today we conclude our four-part series called Be Brave, with a message entitled Healing Your Broken Heart. Over the last 3 weeks we have looked at fear, anxiety and stress, and all of these messages you can find on our YouTube channel. Let me just begin with this comment. If you are a man watching this episode of Soul Matters, especially if you are a white Western male, you will be tempted to bow out or glaze over about now and quietly say to yourself, this isn't my issue, it's hers. Only women experience heartache will be the rejoinder in your mind. Could I ask you please not to do that? If you are a male and you have a pulse and you have feelings, which you do, and you're honest with yourself, then you have experienced heartache, if not a broken heart. And truth be known, probably more than once. Fair? Broken relationships, disappointment in others, loss of a job, an unfulfilled dream, or other negative circumstances can cause heartbreak, and the pain can feel overwhelming. I'd like to illustrate it this way. I've actually used the illustration of my broken ankle that I experienced some years ago earlier in an episode, but any broken bone needs assistance to be healed. And we could see physically a broken bone. In fact, one of my grandchildren broke her ankle just recently and needed to have some doctor's attention and some plaster cast and so on to get that fixed. It needed assistance, it needed support. I'd like to suggest that's exactly the same for a broken heart. Even though it's invisible, it's just as real, if not more painful. The truth is, currently I have a couple of heartaches. I have two people, in fact, I know quite a few people right now who are not doing very well physically, they're ill. But there are two people that are quite close to me, one in my extended family and one a very close friend, who are quite unwell. And though at this point it hasn't broken my heart, I can tell you it has certainly caused me some heartache. There have been many times in life where things have been tough, where family relationships have been strained, where children haven't responded the way that I would have liked, and my heart has been in pain. Society, of course, offers many remedies for heartbreak, ranging from shopping, it's called retail therapy, and again, it's not just a female thing, because I know most men love a bit of retail therapy at Briscoe's or similar store, to getting a makeover, to potentially even going into and consuming harmful substances and doing harmful activities or very risky activities that mean you end up eating the wrong foods, you jumping into a quick relationship, another relationship to solve the hurt, whatever it might be. Many of these activities and actions will only temporarily, of course, distract us from the hurt. Some of them, sadly, will even cause us greater pain and greater hurt. Perhaps the most consistent solution society gives us to deal with heartache is time. You've heard it said, time will heal, time will help. And yes, it may. But this I know, the passage of time to heal a heartache is no guarantee. In fact, I'm not sure that time ultimately does heal a broken heart. Another common response that I've encountered many times in my pastoral work with a large range of people over many years is what you might call denial. Inner voices say things like, I haven't got time to feel sad or bad. Don't get into self-pity. It's just ugly. No self-pity parties. Stuff happens to everybody, so just get over it. Toughen up. Or maybe it's too painful, so I'm better to ignore it. None of these responses, I would suggest, are helpful. Here's the thing. Delaying, denying, or repressing your heartache will never fix it. Can I just say that again? Delaying, denying, or repressing your heartache will never fix it. It's simply not a remedy. In fact, my reading on the subject suggests the opposite. It could actually get a whole lot worse if we deny, delay, or repress. Here's the thing. Just like the illustration of the broken bone, if I had a skin infection here on this hand of mine and I left it unattended for a few days, it's highly likely to be a mess in 2 or 3 days' time. An absolute mess. And it's going to take so much longer to get fixed. Heartache, folks, needs our full attention. Actually, I think it's God's way of saying, you've got pain in the heart, stop. Pay attention to the pain. It's signaling something very important that you need to address. Therefore, we do need to process it carefully. Actually, can I even go this far and say we need to embrace the pain? It's like, a full-on embrace with your loved one. We've got to embrace it and face it and process it. We need to apply some healing salve as soon as we possibly can so that that infection, that pain, gets healed as quick as possible. Now, I know not all pains will go away quickly, but they can be processed. And we can find peace and some kind of resolution in the midst of severe heartache and a broken heart. Again, we shouldn't be surprised, should we? The Bible has a fair bit to say on this topic. Actually, it has a lot to say on it. We could talk a long time about what the Bible says on this. It's got some fabulous insights. God's desire for all of us is that we are whole in every part of us. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't going to be pain. That doesn't mean there isn't going to be some adverse circumstances. That doesn't mean that we're going to have some trouble. No, it doesn't mean that. But that overall, over the longer stretch of life, if you wish, God truly does want us to be whole in every part. And actually, that's exactly what the word salvation means. Many people just have a very narrow view of that word, which thinks it's, and they interpret it as just simply being saved from an old life or from your former sins. Yes, it means that, absolutely. But actually, the full understanding of this word in its original language in the Greek New Testament is that it means wholeness, fullness. It's an amazing, amazing idea. And what the Bible teaches on this is that this word salvation is whole in every part, physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. So I'd like to share with you a few verses that speak about these things. And here is the first. It's from Galatians chapter 6, where we get some insight into how we might begin to process a heartache or a broken heart. And Paul, the apostle, says this. He uses the word burdens. Share each other's burdens, and in this way obey the law of Christ. If you think you are too important to help someone, you are only fooling yourself. You are not that important. Now, the stress of this verse is in the first opening few words. Share each other's burdens. And again, as I mentioned last week, there is an incredible power when we have got where we're well connected with some people whom we love and that we trust, and we begin to talk and disclose and open up the pains that are in our lives. The truth is, I don't know if I would have survived some of the heartache over the years of my life had I not had a loving wife, friends, and other family members who would gather around and help me process, who shared my burden, who shared my pain. You know, as you've heard it said, a problem shared is a problem halved. It's true. The power of community, the power of doing life together. And the Bible emphasizes this, stresses it over and over again. And this is one example of such a verse. The second thing I'd like to strongly recommend. So the first is share each other's burdens. Be open. It's not a sign of weakness. It's just a sign of reality. Life is hard. Pain happens. Infections occur, whether they're on the skin or whether they're in the heart. So talk about it. Also, talk to God about your heartache. Talking helps, whether it's to a human being or whether it's to God. Jesus said this, not using the word heartache, but he may as well. He says this, "Come to me, all of you." This is an open invitation. I love this. Open invitation by Jesus himself, who represents God at the same time as he says this. "Come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens." Life has got too much. There is fear, there is anxiety, there is stress, there is pain in the heart. Come to me, all of you who are weary, tired, and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Doesn't that sound good? I mean, I think this is God's remedy. This is God's medicine bottle, if you wish. But you've got to come. He's just saying, will you come? There's no weakness, there's no crutch here. There's just an acknowledgement that life is hard. Will you come? Because the invitation is for you to come and for all people to come. God has the ability to help all people at all times, in all places. "Take my yoke upon you." And he says, "Let me teach you, because I am humble and gentle at heart, and you will find rest for your souls." Because your soul actually matters. "For my yoke is easy to bear, and the burden I give you is always light." So Jesus says, come. Paul says in the first verse, share. And finally, I'd like to suggest that we read and meditate on the Bible itself. And now, I did say this on my message on stress, but I want to come back to it again because it's powerful. The Bible has got healing words. It's hard to understand that. I mean, it's like, for most people, it's just another book. And I know it's a book, but it has got living words in it. And here, the writer in Proverbs says, "My child," that's you, that's me. "My child, pay attention to what I say. Listen carefully to my words." So this is an encouragement for us to read the Word of God. 66 books, hundreds of chapters, tens of thousands of words, all living words that can help us, that can, if you like, speak into our hearts. "Listen carefully to my words," he says. "Don't lose sight of them. Let them penetrate deep into your heart. There you've got it. For they bring life to those who find them and healing to their whole body. And what he means is what I said earlier, physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. Friends, this is good news. And I would love to encourage you to take these words seriously. Life is hard. We get knocked, we get bruised, we feel pain. And I know that in any crowd of a couple of hundred people, there is a high percentage at any given time of people who are feeling pain deeply. And God has a remedy. Your friends have a remedy. They can help. Relaxation, exercises, eating the right food, getting enough rest, all of these things can help, but supremely, the greatest help of all comes from the one who made you, who created you, and who feels your pain when you are experiencing it. So come to him, and he will help you and heal you.
Hi, I'm Jeanette. My heart goes out to you if you are carrying a broken heart. There are many things that break our hearts, but often it's because we love. C.S. Lewis said, "To love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything and your heart will certainly be wrung and possibly be broken." Let us pray. Loving God, why does it hurt so much when we're broken-hearted? Today we want to be honest and talk with you about how we really feel. Help us not to deny these painful feelings and emotions, but instead to hand them over to you. God, it's your healing we need, your love and grace and presence to be poured afresh into our hearts. We lay our brokenness before you, unashamed. You, gracious Lord, know all things and all of our pain. We receive your healing balm deep into our hearts. Thank you that it is in you that we can be made whole. Give us new hope, new strength, and a new heart. Amen.
So now it's time for our faith stories, and right now I have with me Jessica Perry, who is from the Waikato BOP King Country, as well as being the PA to the Diocesan Bishop of the Waikato and Taranaki. She loves to play the flute. I love it when she plays the flute, and she also enjoys travelling. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So you became a Christian when you were quite young. You grew up in a Christian family. Why did you make the decision to become a Christian?
Well, my first memory of church life was in a high school hall in Sukowhira, where my parents were farming. And I remember one particular Easter being in Sunday school and them talking about what Jesus had done for us that Easter and sacrificing himself on the cross to save us. And I remember asking the teacher a lot of questions and what that actually meant, and deciding then that actually that was what I wanted to follow, somebody who was prepared to do that for me.
Awesome. So what was life like before? You were pretty young, and what was life like after you accepted Jesus?
Life before and probably immediately after was very sheltered. Being on a farm, our closest neighbours were 2 or 3 kilometres down the road and were grandparents and that sort of thing. I do remember my grandmother, who was not a Christian, asking me how could I follow someone who would allow starving children to die in Africa. And as a 7-year-old, it's quite confronting and not knowing how to answer that.
Absolutely.
But as I grew older, around about the age of 8, we moved from the farm into Tauranga, where my parents went to Faith Bible College, and that was a big culture shock. And I think my walk with God got a lot harder because there was a lot more opportunity to be challenged, and I hadn't been challenged before.
Right. So, and then you were at Faith Bible College for a year, and then moved out from there as well. Tell us what happened after that time, as in you were a Christian, but things began to change.
The biggest change happened when we went to Te Kuiti. Dad became the pastor of the Te Kuiti Baptist Church when I was 10 or 11, and we were there for my early teen years. Being a teenager is hard enough, but then also being the pastor's daughter added extra pressure onto that. I had a very strong opinion on what was right and what was wrong, and that was challenged daily. And I copped a lot of abuse because of it, and because I was so outspoken. There were times where I walked out of the school hall because they were doing things that really disagreed with me internally. As I got older though, I probably mellowed a little bit and then started questioning a lot of things, and was probably swayed by peer pressure and those sorts of things, which ultimately ended with me making my own decision and no longer attending any church of any kind.
Right. So what happened over the next few years when you weren't walking as a Christian or walking with God, as it were?
I think I lived in denial for quite a while. I knew that there was something missing, and the core of me knew right and wrong, and that the life I was living was not the life that I was intended to live. I was in quite a long-term relationship, which ended up being quite manipulative and abusive, and because I'd already compromised on so many things, and he knew that, it was sort of used against me. But I was very lucky that I had parents that trusted in God enough to allow me to make those mistakes and make my own decisions, and they knew that in His time I would make the decision. And I mean, I probably, like running a race, I stumbled at the first hurdle, and quite spectacularly, but God picked me up, and my parents had the faith to allow me to seek Him out as opposed to pushing me in that direction.
So what was it that happened that made you decide, I am going to go back to my parents' faith, I'm going to go back to my faith? What made that for you?
Well, the relationship ended, and I probably spent a year questioning who I was. What was it that I wanted to achieve in life? Where did I see myself in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? Those sorts of big, heavy questions. What did I want to accomplish? And the answer to all of those things revolved around a church life and a Christian way of being and doing something for the greater good and those sorts of things. And then I realised that actually in order to do that, I needed to be right within myself and discover my walk with God. I had somebody ask me once, do I share my parents' faith? And it really, I had to sit back because I didn't know how to answer that, because my instinct was to say, well, no, because I have my faith. We might believe in the same book and the same God, but my journey is different from theirs.
Absolutely. So you've come back into the church, you've been back in church for a number of years now. What is good for you? What is the best thing about following Jesus, being a Christian, being involved in church?
For me, it's been the restoration. I had gifts that were given and talents that I was able to use whilst working for God and in the church. And when I walked away, those gifts disappeared. I no longer had them. And the realisation of them being restored, helping out with the Sunday school kids, playing my flute again, acting, all of those things have come back and have been quite moving for me in realising and looking back that actually those things all fell away at the same time, and they've all been restored because I've been restored.
And I imagine that while you're serving, using those gifts, we generally enjoy using our gifts, that there is also healing taking place.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest healing for me was the Christmas production and playing my flute and having that moment of it all going the way that it should, and realising that actually it wasn't me at all, it was him all along.
Well, that is awesome, and I don't want to say anything more after that because that was a really good line. Thank you so much for coming, Jess.
Thank you for having me.
Cool.
I'd like to recommend a song that is simply called Mended, again by gospel singer Matthew West. And the way he puts it is interesting in relation to what we've just talked about. When you see nothing but damaged goods. So this is talking about a person that's been knocked around a fair bit and feeling pretty down on it. I see something good in the making. This is reflecting God's viewpoint. When you see nothing but damaged goods, I see something good in the making. I'm not finished yet. When you see wounded, I see mended. Powerful. I hope you enjoy the song. Thank you for joining us this week. God bless you, and look forward to seeing you again next week.